just create yourself a class that's called die. And whenever you're creating an object, you want to think about, okay, if I were describing this object to someone who couldn't see it, or describing it over the phone, what are the things I would have to say about this die right here? Let's say there's a die on your desk, and you're trying to describe it to someone. What are the things that you would need to describe? Yeah, Kevin?
Sides. How many sides?
How many sides it has? Okay, so that could be one member variable that we would want, so an int number of sides. Right? If you didn't, people would probably assume 6, but there are plenty of dice out there that have more than 6 sides. Megan?
The number on each side?
So the number on each side, so you would have to say whether like it has a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or whether it's a weird one that has letters like A, B, C, D, or things like that, which is true. And because that would make the model complicated, I'm not going to include it in this one today. But if you're going to make a really good die class that could have could represent any kind of die, you would need to account for the possibility that all the sides might have, who knows what on it. Maybe weird numbers or random numbers or only prime numbers or things like that. But for simplicity, we'll keep that one off for today, because you can imagine that one's going to be definitely complicated to do. Yeah.
Dimension?
Dimensions as in
Like
what?
how big it is?
Oh, how big it is? Yes. So, and this is something we're also going to keep off today, but by the time you get to your the games that you're going to do, you might need to include these things. So you might have something like the dimensions, because when you're playing the game, the size of the die might matter, depending on the game. And when you're drawing it onto the screen for someone to see, the drawing algorithm is going to need to know how big the size of it is. So that would also be a good one to keep. Sorry I'm not putting all these good ones on just because they're too complicated for today, but I want you to get the idea of the process you should go through and all of the things that should be on there when you're making the best possible one. The only reason we're not putting all these on is because of time restrictions. There's one other thing that if you want to describe to someone, like I just rolled a die and it's on my desk, and guess what number? Yeah, well, guess what number it's showing? Like the number that it's showing on the die, right? The one that's up like this. If you want to make it more complicated, you could also show what's facing out in all the directions. Oh, to the east, the 2 is facing, and to the west, there's a 5. But let's just make it pretty simple and say the current value, which corresponds to whatever is facing up. And this is our ultra-simplified version of a die. Another one would have to have all that stuff, maybe size, dimension, the color of the die. Maybe there's a game that has different colors of dice, things like that. So all of those could have also been instance variables. Now we need to say, when someone's creating a die, what do they need to provide? So public die, that's how you do a constructor. Make sure it's exactly the same as the name of the class. It should also be capitalized just like the class is. Should it be possible for someone to create a die without providing any information? To say, I want a new die. Is there sort of a default die that you would expect to get? Yep. Like 6-sided ones? So, all right. And so we could maybe just say like the number of sides. If someone tries to create a die without providing any information, then we would just say the number of sides equals 6 like that. What about the current value? What would they be expecting? Something random, right? Like if you kept asking someone for a new die and they kept like giving you this exact same die facing up with the same number, that would maybe seem a little weird. They're not really expecting anything, right? They're probably expecting a random number. So let's do that. Let's say int math.random times 6. And that will give something from 0 to 5, so we add on a +1 to get it from 1 to 6. Also, you want to think if you ever start something out with a constructor that just gives a random number, whether that's going to anger people, right? So, and in this case, it wouldn't. If someone asked for a die and you handed it to them, they're not going to get angry. Like, why did you not place it with the 3 up in the air? Like, why would you just randomly put it in my hand? Then that's not going to happen. So same with the computer program. This is what someone should probably expect. And in your documentation or your Java.doc comments, you could even say that. This is the default constructor. Here's what it does. Although it is pretty simple to understand just from reading the code. Question over there? Is there a question?
Why did you add the first one again?
Oh, because math.random produces something from 0 to 0.999999. When you multiply by 6, it goes from 0 to 5.999999. When you round, it would get from 0 to 5. So I wanted it to be from 1 to 6. And also, there's something a little bit wrong right here. What should I change to make this all better? Oh, we're going to do one with some parameters. But what about this? Well, I put a times 6 right here. I should have put a times num sides. Right? I mean, it should, they're the same, but remember the only time you should have a number is when it's being assigned into a variable. So technically this little +1 right here is breaking the rule a little bit. We often allow the +1 to break the rule because you often have to do a +1 or a -1 to offset something. But you don't just want a random 6 in the middle, because then people are going to say, well, is that the same 6 as this? But now there's no question. Yeah, it's the same thing as this. All right, next. Public, let's make another way. Public die. Okay, do we want to allow people to create a die just by specifying the number of sides? Like say, give me a die with 8 sides? Yeah? Okay, so in this case, though, they would need to provide an int with the number of sides, right? And it would look very similar to this one. So I'm going to copy all of this. And except now it would be num sides is going to be equal to the integer that they provided. Yeah, Isaiah?
So, what if you how do you determine which of those two routines you would call on?
When you're creating the die?
Yeah.
If you're making a program that requires you to have a die, you would just decide what kind of die do I want. Do I just want a default one with 6 sides?
No, what I'm saying is when you do call on die, like how do you know which one it's going to call?
Based on the information you provide. If you provide no information, it's going to do this one. If you provide an int, it's going to do this one right here.
Okay.
Yeah, it will be all based on the parameters you provide. Should we also make it possible for someone to say, I would like a die that has 4 as the value, to be able to specify the initial value on the die? Yeah, maybe? Okay, so maybe like this. So public die int initial value, and then we'll say what num sides is equal to 6 for the default, and then current value equals the specified initial value, like that. So we have some, oops, I didn't spell that right. There's some errors now. We want to talk about those, but question first, yeah.
How would the user know, like, no, if the user puts a number in, how would the computer know if it's talking about the number of sides or the initial value?
Exactly. If the user puts a number in, how does the computer know whether that number is supposed to be the initial value or the sides? And the answer is the computer does not know, which means this right here needs to be removed. So you can't have 2 constructors with the same parameters. So as nice as it would be, there are other languages where you can do this by, like, you just specify the names of the parameters and it allows you to do that, but in this case, no. Yeah, Andrew?
Does the constructor have to be both die?
The constructor has to be the exact same name as the class, yes. Yeah.
Could you use double instead and just input like 6.1?
So it is possible that you could then start including doubles, yes. And as long as that makes sense to have one of them be doubles, you could do that, and that would distinguish it, yes.
When you just say that the variables are in num size and in current value, is that public or private?
The name of the variable is only used inside of your subroutine. It's a local variable, sort of. And so they could look that up in your source code, but Java doesn't allow you to specify whether the number you're passing in, like, what its name is. So some other programming languages allow you to do that, to say what the name of your parameter is so that it gets put into the right variable. Java is totally based on position. Whatever position the parameter is in, it will put it into the variable in that position. And so if you have 2 constructors that both have an int as their first position, or their only one, it has no idea which one to put it in. So it's a problem that could be fixed. They just chose not to do it that way.
But you declared variables at the top.
Uh-huh.
Since you didn't put public or private in front of them.
Oh, if you just wanted to go ahead and change these, you mean?
I mean, since you didn't declare if they were public or private,
Mhm.
so I don't understand which one it would be.
You don't understand which one of what it would be.
Since you didn't say if they were public or private, they're just.
Oh, I see what you mean. So are these public or private,
Yeah.
since there's nothing in front of them?
Yeah.
Excellent question, sorry. These are called default visibility, I think, or something like that, which is not private and also not public. It means package visible. It means they're any class in the same package. It's almost like they're public to them, but you couldn't go to another package, say, and import this package and then use it. So it's very similar to being public unless you start going into other packages. But I guess we probably want to make both of these private, right? There's no reason why you don't want anyone to ever accidentally or on purpose change the current value of the die. Yes, you want it to be possible to roll the die, but we're going to make a subroutine to do that. You don't want someone just to be able to change it to whatever they want. So let's make both of those private. Yeah, sorry, I didn't understand that question. And then let's go, let's have one more constructor. Let's allow them, if they want to say the number of sides, and then after that, they can say the initial value. So it would be num sides is equal to sides, and then current value of the die would be equal to the initial value that was provided through the parameters. All right. Okay, now we're ready to do a subroutine. Let's do one that rolls rolls the die. So it's, do we want this to return anything? It doesn't have to. All it has to do is change the current value. But it would probably be nice if it also returned the current value after you change it, just so that, because people usually like to roll the dice and then use the new current value in something. So that would prevent them from having to roll the dice and then say get current value. So let's just make this return an int. And it's just going to be roll. They don't need to provide any information to roll the dice. They just need to call in the roll subroutine. And all we would have to do is change current value to equal int math.random num sides +1, like that. And then that could be enough, except I wanted to make it also return the value, so it could be a little more useful. So then I'll also return the current value, so they can use it if they want to. If not, they won't do anything. They'll just call on the roll subroutine and they won't store the result anywhere. All right, so there it is right there, roll. Notice now that we have current value equals this in 3 locations in the code. It's usually a bad sign, right? What if we wanted to change it? What if we found a better random function and we wanted to start using that instead of the math.random? Then we'd have to go to here, and to here, and to here to change all 3 of them. And what if we miss one? What if it's a big file and we miss one of them? This sort of repeating we can avoid by just using subroutine calls. So up here in the constructors, instead of doing that, I'm just going to call on the roll subroutine that I just did. And then in the future, if I ever want to change how the random number is chosen, because it's possible maybe in the future I also want to make there be an option of making it a slightly unfair die, where one of the sides is more likely to be rolled than the other one. And in that case, I would have to change the roll subroutine. And I would like to just do that one time. Just go into the roll subroutine and change it right here, and then have the results be used everywhere else. All right, so one last thing. It would be nice if we could also to have a toString method, so that if we print a die, if we try to do system.out.print of a die, that it doesn't just give a weird address, it gives something meaningful about the information stored in the die. So let's do public string toString, takes no parameters, and let's just have it return, how about the current value? That's probably good enough, right there. Except it wants it as a string, so I'll have to append that onto a string. Yeah, Andrew.
Wait, so if you just said roll parentheses, would it just roll and not return any value? Like even though it says return, can you call the method without returning any value?
Oh yeah, it's still going to return, but it's not going to store it anywhere. It's kind of just like typing the number 8 somewhere.
Okay, cool.
It's not going to do anything. It's just going to sit there. Actually, Java doesn't even allow it. Yeah, if a function returns a value and you don't feel like storing it because you don't really need it, you don't have to. Yeah.
Can we make the get things? Since it's
Ooh, it is private. Let's make some getters, and we should probably never have a setter. The only way to change the value of the die is to roll it. So it always has to be random. People just can't change it to be whatever they want. So let's make a public getter. So it's going to return an int. So get current value. They don't need to provide any information. Remember that it has to be the exact same name as the variable. It doesn't have to be, but that's the style. Make it the exact same name as the variable, except that now this will be capitalized because it comes right after the word get. And all you're going to do is say return current value. All right. At this point, go over to the make a new class called die tester, and inside there make a main subroutine where you can create a few different dice and roll them and print them out and see what they are, and just make sure that this all works and that you know how to create a new die using the die class that we've just created right here.